In the absence of Ms. Brock, who would like to do roll call today? Dara? Okay, either one. Yep, here.
Yes.
Pastor Jones, Dr. Ford,
Here.
Ms. Crystal Jackson,
I'm here.
Pastor Nathan, and Mr. Carl Strickland.
All right, thank you all. So we'll start with the approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to take a look at those minutes?
Yes.
And does anyone have any additions, edits, corrections? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept.
Move.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. All right, motion carries, minutes approved. All right, next I'll turn it over to the Inspector General for a department update.
Thank you. I wanted to start off by wishing everybody a happy New Year's from the Department of the DIG. Hope that everybody had a great holiday with their family and friends. We did send out the monthly report. We try to make sure that we send it out a couple of days in advance, giving the board members a chance if they have any questions. We didn't receive any questions, but I will say if there are any questions after the meeting, please feel free just to email, through Stephanie, and we will answer any additional questions. I did still want to go through and do some highlights for the board, if that's okay. So up under the monthly report is for November. Citizens' complaints that we received for the month of November were 81 complaints that we received. Out of those 81 complaints, we opened 21 investigations. We actually closed 57 at intake. One was placed on administrative hold. I'm just kind of going through the report, so if anyone had any questions. Again, the reasons that we close reports are listed, why some of the reasons were. One of the big reasons was a lot of the reports were referred to another agency. We do receive a lot of phone calls sometimes, can involve 911 operators. So sometimes, we definitely end up referring quite a few over to ECC. Out of the complaints that were opened, we opened 21. We actually closed 21 cases in November, and 12 cases still remained on administrative hold. Out of the 22 cases that were closed in November, there were 68 allegations that were investigated. Out of that, 36 of those allegations were involving actions taken, not taken. That was the highest count. The next highest count, being 8, was search and seizure. We also broke the allegations out of the 68 allegations that were investigated. We broke those down by precincts, and that's on page 4, so it tells you the different precincts. Out of that, the precinct that had the highest number of cases was precinct 16. There were 6 cases, and out of those 6 cases, there were 18 allegations that were investigated. Out of the 68 allegations that were investigated, 45 were closed unfounded, 15 were closed exonerated, and 8 were closed with sustained misconduct. And then out of the 8 allegations that were closed sustained misconduct, 1 was for profanity, 2 were for search and seizure, 4 were for actions taken, not taken, and 1 involved a operation of vehicle. And then for the month of November, the Civilian Review Board reviewed 30 reports. I just wanted to comment that since these cases were cases that were closed in November, most of the reports that the board is probably reviewing now, you're probably reviewing a lot of the different cases. So I did highlight, if anybody wants me to go over the cases that were sustained, I can give you that. But on the back of the report, we've been giving everybody a summary of all of the cases. So for those members that didn't get the cases because you're still separating by committee, if you look at the report, you'll have a summary of all of the cases that the board is most likely reviewing and voting on for the month of December. And so with that, I wanted to still give you, are there any other questions before I go to the update involving the dashboard?
Yeah, I have a question. I think it's on page 4, there's the number of cases and allegations by precinct and finding. I have 2 questions here. Do you capture that data? Because you identified or stated that you have what they were, this sustained, what it was for, but do you put that with the precinct so we would know precinct 7, they had 2 sustained allegations of whatever that allegation was?
Yes, if you look up here, we'll say what the sustained, we broke it down. So to tell you, I think precinct 7 had 2 sustained, precinct 11 had 3 sustained.
Sustained of what was the allegation?
What was it exactly? So if you look on the back where the summary is, the summary should tell you what the case was and where the sustained allegation.
Okay, so you don't put that in an itemized chart for us?
We don't put it in the chart, no.
Okay.
Let Nate speak up.
Oh,
Dr.
go on,
Jones.
Nate.
Chart H actually breaks down the sustained allegations for the month of November. So that is the breakdown of profanity, search and seizure, actions taken, not taken, operation vehicle. So those are all the sustained allegations.
Correct, but it's not put with the precinct, is what I'm saying.
Gotcha. I understand.
So that would be helpful if we kind of had it all together so we can see on precinct 2, there are 2 sustained allegations of whatever that allegation is. And then the other thing, and you mentioned precinct 16 had the highest number of cases and allegations. However, when I'm looking at this chart though, the precinct with the most sustained allegation is actually precinct 11. And so I'm just curious, are you all keeping track or record of, where this information, the precincts with the highest number of sustained allegations, and providing that regularly to CPD? Is that happening?
So let me ask, so I just want to understand your question. You're asking the cases that we have with the sustained allegations, are we providing CPD with that stat?
Yeah, I'm just curious to know, like, once they get it, are they aware of this so that they know it's kind of like on their radar? And then, like, let's say you get the next review period where you're producing another report and precinct 11 has, I don't know, they might have 4 cases with 5 sustained allegations, or 4 cases with 3 sustained allegations, again, something like that. And so then you're consistently saying, okay, you letting CPD know, hey, putting this on your radar, precinct 11 is having the highest number of sustained allegations, so there might need to be a deeper dive into this. Is that happening, basically, is what I'm asking?
What I will say is, and to the answer to your question, no, we don't provide that specific to them, but the reports that the board signs off, all of those reports go over to CPD. So CPD has the ability to review and see what our findings are, because there are cases where we sustain cases here and CPD disagrees with us. So even though our records will say that we sustained that officer for misconduct, CPD may come back and overturn that and say they disagree. And so they will change that. But CPD has the ability to track all of this information.
So trend information, you're saying CPD would have to do that. You don't provide that to them?
We don't provide that to CPD, and the
Okay.
main reason we wouldn't, again, like I said, because they don't, they change things. But what I will say, I don't know if this helps you or not, is when we meet with CPD quarterly, we do have a conversation with them, especially if there's a case that we've sustained misconduct and they have changed it. Sometimes we do have a conversation with them just to kind of understand what it is as to why they disagree. Sometimes it's wording.
Okay.
But yeah, we don't provide specifically this information. We can provide them with the report. I mean, obviously, this is for public record and if they have any questions. But again, they do have the ability, I believe, to track everything, because everything that the board does go over to CPD. And at the end, when we're able to get the dispositions back, this is what we report out on a quarterly report. We're reporting out on information that we've gotten back from the chain of command after they've reviewed it and made whatever adjustments, whether they agree or disagree.
I don't know if it should be a recommendation or, well, I would recommend, if there is a way to put some trend information together to provide that to CPD, I think that would probably be helpful for them.
Are there any other questions for the IG about the monthly report?
Can I ask one other question? I just want to clarify, so when I make my notes, you just want to make sure that we provide information regarding the sustained allegation, because we can give them this, but if you want us to point out specifically the sustained, then I just want to make sure that we're doing that too.
I just want you to be able to provide CPD with some information. Usually if there's smoke, there's fire. So if there are some trends that you all are seeing in your work, instead of just kind of masking it all in one comprehensive report, you can identify, hey, you might need to take a look at precinct 16. You might need to take a look at precinct 11 because we're receiving more allegations or we're receiving more sustained allegations in this area, just to put it on their radar. I just think that should be a part of the process that's happening over in the IG's office.
Okay. And what I will say is, when it comes to the officers, while we haven't focused specifically on the precincts, what I will say is anytime we received a lot of complaints involving an officer where we're identifying its focus on one specific officer, that we do make sure that we notify CPD with. And anything that I will say we get complaints in that may be something that is different or unusual, we do make it an effort to follow up with CPD on that. But I will say on the precincts and stuff, we haven't, but we can definitely make sure that we're doing that.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
Want to follow up now?
Thank you, Inspector General.
I just want to make sure I'm doing my other file. Are there any other questions on the report before I do the follow-up on the dashboard? Okay. So where we are with the dashboard, the last meeting we had with the city's IT department that actually handles Tableau, it was on December the 8th. We met with them to really just discuss our data, where the data is actually stored. That was important, whether it's stored within the city server or whether it's stored in the cloud. So we had a conversation regarding that. We were able to figure that information out. Where we are right now is we will be meeting again with them on January the 12th, and the discussion is going to be regarding the reports that we do, the information that the city is, the information that the department is actually gathering. We're going to be doing a demonstration to them of Matrix, how we put the information in from the intake status to the case status, just so they're able to see the information that we're capturing. After that, the next goal would be to work with Matrix to discuss an architect. So that would be coming forward. One of the things that we're trying to do is we have to do a proposal, because as we go further into Matrix, for them to be able to talk with IT and provide the architecture for how to see how all this information is going to come together, we have to do a proposal for them billing us per hour to see where that's going to go. I feel strongly that we're almost there, since we have been able to at least identify the fact that we do have a system in place where we're able to use that to be able to gather the information and to be able to display it. The other thing that we've kind of have been dealing with, IT suggested that we attend a class, which we did. We had a couple of our people attend the class to understand how to use the dashboard. Tableau is what they're recommending. What I can say, what we gathered from that is we don't really have anybody in our office with the skill set to be able to handle that. So we are really working with IT to have them provide that service, that skill set for us to be able to manage the database once we're able to get that created. So that's just kind of where we are right now, but I do feel strongly that at least, hopefully very soon, we should be able to at least have an ideal of what that dashboard is going to look like, and then have a time frame as to when we'll be able to actually implement it so that we're able to start displaying that information on the website. Are there any questions?
I'll just say that's welcome news. Been a big fan of the dashboard for a while, so it's great to see you all working towards that. And then just getting a sense of timeline, and if there's anything else that we can do as a board to help facilitate that process, please let us know. I hear the mention about getting some support in terms of actually managing the Tableau software and utilizing that. So hopefully we can have some sort of partnership where that is able to be implemented. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions for the Inspector General? Okay, thank you. Now we will turn to case updates. We've got a couple of kind of standalone ad hoc cases from previous meetings. So I'd like to start with those and then move over to committees. So we have 25-0586 and 25-0641. Do the committees responsible for those case reviews have any updates on those discussions?
Those were assigned to our committee, and I'm just looking for them. I don't know if, Dr. Jones, if you have,
So I have the response for one of them. So the case 0641.
yes,
That was a case involving a alleged detective making some sexist comments or
Exactly, and
remarks.
I have
And
that
we
one.
had additional questions about that. That one we sent in the meeting, because it was in my draft folders, the questions over to the IG, and then they did follow up with a response.
yes,
And that response was
on the 26th of January,
correct.
December, excuse
December,
me.
yes, December. And then just, and
We haven't had an opportunity to discuss that response as a committee.
correct.
Essentially, the response was that the case was investigated and that the processes followed, that the officers followed procedure. But there was no body worn camera from the officer, and there was no phone recordings, and so there was simply insufficient evidence, apparently, to justify the complaint because there was no BWC and no phone recordings, so the IG determined that they followed procedure.
This is on 064, 0641.
I don't know how to respond to that. I mean, there's just not, we don't have any countervailing evidence because it doesn't exist.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, basically, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah. Was there any requirement that there be body-worn camera evidence, Inspector General?
I'm trying to just kind of go off of what I remember. If I'm not mistaken, I mean, any case that we investigate, especially if someone, and I think in this particular case, there were some allegations that were made about the officer, I'm looking at it. So there were some allegations that were made about the officer's actions. So when part of the process is that we have to contact the complainant to get specifically what is that complainant saying that officer did. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe that when we were trying to contact the complainant, we were able to get that. You can't investigate something that we don't have specifics on. And I believe that was one of the reasons that this was closed. A lot of times, even if we contact the complainant, but we have body worn camera, that at least gives us something to kind of view, to get, gives us something to view to figure out exactly.
What I'm asking is, was there a requirement in this case that there be body-worn camera evidence?
Let's
Well, I believe these were detectives,
Okay.
Board Member Nathan, so they would not have body worn camera anyway. I understand what your question is, but, excuse me, I just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
Two
that was,
sergeants.
yeah, but, yeah.
I think they were from the sex crime unit.
They're from organized crime.
And I believe that the complainant couldn't state how the officer wasn't taking it seriously. She had
Yeah,
nothing
yeah,
but
the
a,
one that we were asking about was specifically the sexist comments. And,
the second allegation.
yeah.
Yeah, I think for this one specifically, if I remember correctly, it was something along the lines of just wondering why it was just the complainant that was interviewed and not the sergeant as well, or the detective in this case, the officer. And I think the response was the complainant could not clearly articulate how the officer was being sexist or not taking the investigation seriously. And so I think it was insufficient information in terms of that determination that was made there. And I think our committee, we never kind of formally came back together to kind of ask what we are now, which is the follow-up of kind of saying, was there any sort of requirement beyond that? But I think this might have been a time management,
Yes, sir.
process point per investigator. In certain cases, you decide to interview an officer, you have the information you need, and don't interview an officer. That's just a kind of a standard practice, if I'm understanding, given the information or lack thereof.
Yeah, the complainant, she couldn't state what made her feel that it was sexist, and she didn't have any specific comments to, relate to that. As far as the officer, the contract, we didn't have an allegation by definition to, call them in to answer questions about. Because there was no, we didn't have enough, validation, I guess, to support calling the officer in.
And
Yeah. Her allegation was very simply that in this case, where there was pandering obscenity to her minor daughter, the officer suggested that the daughter might have been at fault in receiving that pornographic or obscene information, and she interpreted that as sexist, that they were blaming the daughter who was the recipient of the obscene material. And so in her mind, that was a reasonable implication of how was her daughter at fault for receiving this obscene material. So it stood on its face as sexist by definition. That was her allegation. You all thought that that was not sufficient to move forward.
I mean, anytime we get complaints from complainants, sometimes complainants use their own interpretation. So it's really important for us to talk to the complainant to get specifically what they said. And based on the information that we had, we didn't feel that that was sufficient enough for us to proceed, which is the reason why we would make it a point to contact the complainant to get specific, because maybe there's some information or additional information that they can provide that they did not provide in this complaint. And so based on what we had, we just didn't have enough to proceed.
And I think that brings to a question in terms of the follow-up. Because in this particular report, I don't know if there's information about how many times or how many conversations were had with that complainant. Because, if a follow-up is, we need more information, we're not getting information, and then the complainant just wasn't giving more information, then that's one thing versus perhaps, I believe my understanding is that once a determination is made from your office, you all notify the complainant what your determination is. Is that correct?
If there is a way for us to do that. Sometimes it's not always verbal, sometimes it's email, sometimes it's anonymous. So we do try to notify the complainant if they have contact information available for us.
Okay.
But what I would always say is, which is important, is when you have questions, I mean, if you come into the office and you have an opportunity to talk to the investigator who actually has like a more in-depth information, I mean, we have an overview, but we can do a deeper dive into the case notes to be able to provide some specific information versus, at the board meeting, we're trying to just give you an overview. But if you have
No, we
questions.
wrote.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I'm saying, and we responded, but if
Right, but we
there's,
responded, and, but you said that y'all didn't get to re-review it, I guess, or didn't get to reconvene.
Well, it was
So
December
like we would
26th
go ahead, I'm sorry.
that we got
Okay,
the
I have-
response.
I have a question. Does anyone know whether the adult in question was charged following this incident with pandering?
I don't know that offhand.
yeah, we would have to kind of look into that.
The reason I ask is because it's a strict liability offense, and so there's no, there's no mens rea. It's one of those offenses that as soon as it happens, it's a crime.
That's what I was attempting to say before. You just stated it with more clarity.
And what I'm a little perplexed about is, let's say charges were filed against this person, and that officer's response, if that's what he said, is then brought into court. I mean, if I were CPD, I'd be concerned
Right.
that's a statement that an officer was making if it directly impacts the ability to prosecute a case. Because 12 years old is always a victim in those scenarios. And so I'm wondering, Committee 1, do you all want to go back and have a discussion? I think it is difficult because there's no BWC in this instance,
Correct.
but do you want to go back and have a discussion about, I don't know, a
Well,
recommendation or of some sort for the
I think I
officer?
have a recommendation, and
Okay.
but before, I do have a question for the IG, Deputy Director Blunt. Does your investigators and your staff, do they undergo any type of sexual harassment training as it pertains to conducting investigations? How to deal with victims of crime and things like that?
I will say, right now, I know in the beginning, we actually had an advocate that came in and did training the first year. We do training every year, but I don't believe the last 2 years that we've had training for that.
Okay, so that's no. So that would be a proposed recommendation that I would have, that the staff go through some training so that when investigators are encountering a case like this, that there's just a little bit more sensitivity involved in how they handle it.
Yes, ma'am, and I would just, if we didn't answer your question today, I would just ask that you resubmit that so that we can get with the investigators and get the real facts. We know the case, but some of the questions that were asked, the investigator would definitely be able to answer that, or the intake person. So if we did not address your question, please submit those questions, as always, in advance of the meeting, please.
Yeah, and I think in addition to those recommendations, I think in this particular case is kind of, I think specifically with us, I don't know what further we have to discuss other than some follow-up from the outcome of this particular case. Specifically, kind of what I mean by that is there was a finding, a determination that was made. It was here was an administrative closure. My understanding is that when that determination is made, that complainant is contacted, so long as you have that contact information. So in this case, I'm assuming that that complainant was then contacted. That follow-up is where, I talked about why I'm interested in a dashboard is because want to understand how complainants and officers feel about a particular investigation, and where are their avenues for feedback throughout a particular process. So if this person received this finding of an administrative closure, is that just then the end of the conversation? And I understand that that's the end of this investigation, so long as this board doesn't move this forward to the CPD chain of command, we don't send it back. That's what I'm a little bit more curious about. So I'll be specific on this case, which is I'd like to see kind of where this outcome is. This case in of itself, the underlying investigation could be ongoing. Who knows? And so then that is kind of a follow-up conversation with CPD about the sergeant handling this particular investigation, and what are their avenues for feedback if a complainant feels that a sergeant or detective is not taking their investigation seriously. And so specifically, I'm interested in a follow-up for this case, but then I do think more broadly, and I understand that this is personnel capacity, I would like to see if there are avenues for feedback from complainants and officers based on investigation and what that looks like. Maybe it's ad hoc right now. Somebody calls your office and said, hey, I had a great investigation, or I didn't think this went well, or they're supposed to respond to the CPRB, but I don't know if we've even established an opportunity for feedback from residents or officers outside of some of the town halls we've held. And so whether that's through you all or through us, that's something I'm interested in, and that could help hopefully solve some of these ongoing questions that we've had.
And just,
Could I briefly, so I don't forget, Nate, are you taking minutes or?
I'm assisting, but Jared's officially.
Okay, so for the purposes of the minutes, there was a case, last four digits, 1413, with similar facts in which an 11-year-old girl was receiving nude photos from an adult male. When police responded, the complainant alleged that the officer essentially said, well, we could charge the girl too. And I believe we may have made a recommendation policy-wise regarding whether it was training or, and I can't, and this is why I'm asking for it. If we could locate what we did there, because I think for consistency purposes, it feels like it fits in the same bucket, right? Like that when we have a bad acting adult and a child, how our goal, even in the pursuit of getting the right information, is probably, we don't want it to be that we are either threatening the child or, even if it's true, because I think that's the discussion we landed on, even if legally this girl, the 11-year-old in that case, could have been charged with something for having an image on her phone, which is also true, that's also strict liability, that's not the policy that we want to have perpetuated. And so if we could locate that, because I couldn't find it offhand
Yeah,
quickly
we had
here.
that case, but I don't know
That
where
was
it
our
is.
case.
It was over a year ago.
I remember that
I know a case.
because I was like,
Yeah,
you
that
should.
was-
It was in the media.
Yeah, and it was a Ring camera, like
Yeah.
the video, because it might have been detectives as well, then I can't remember, but there wasn't BWC,
Yeah.
it was Ring camera
And the police
only.
chief issued a statement prior to
Yeah.
this even going through the CRB.
So if, I'd at least like to perhaps be consistent if, just because if it's the similar scenario that we're seeing again, and
I will say though, in that case, if I recall, I don't think there was any particular finding that,
no, there wasn't.
yeah. Because I remember, weird.
Because it's,
It was body.
it's again, pretty similar, right? Like, we don't have, here we're missing something, but I think, at least I feel like the conclusion seems like it should be the same, at least from our perspective, right? If we want officers to not engage in that behavior.
Well, generally, I do. I mean, whether it's a question for the IG or CPD, I mean, if a complainant says that a sergeant is not taking this investigation seriously, how many avenues do they have to issue that complaint? So there's the DIG, but I'm assuming also that there is conversation they have with CPD officers based on this ongoing investigation. But that's all information that we don't have, and so perhaps you all could not get that information if you know you had multiple conversations with the complainant. But these are all questions that I still have, which is, you know, how do we actually make a determination prior to maybe an administrative closure without this information? I think it's just insufficient, not enough information for us to.
And again, the questions that you're asking they're great questions. I think, again, you know, having the time to actually come to the office and sit and talk to the investigator. The issue we have sometimes is when we're reaching out and we're talking to the complainant, and I'm going to mention the complainant because that's what the issue is here, is when the complainants file a complaint and we're talking to them, we cannot, we need them to be able to articulate what it is that they feel the officer said or did. We can't put words in their mouth, if you understand, because it's important for us, if you notice when we do the reports, we'll say, hey, when we talk to them, this is specifically what they said. Sometimes we break that down because we will get a complaint where the person may say that they feel like the officer was either rude or discourteous, and we say, what is it that the officer said or did that you feel is rude and discourteous? And then we try to break that down because what the officer said may not have been. So again, in this case, I think the issue is that when we reached out to try to get more specific information so we could investigate specifically what the person is alleging happened, they weren't able to provide that information. And so that leads us with not the ability to be able to investigate an allegation if we don't have specific details. But again, this would have been great, you know, again, if, you know, you were able to come into the office and then all of the questions you're able to ask, you have the chance to sit down and we could go through the case file and pull more specific information to be able to answer the questions that you have so you feel comfortable, you know, moving forward with it. Although I know we do the emails and stuff, but sometimes the emails just, you know, it's a little bit different because, again, you're individuals and you may have specific questions that you feel was not answered. But again, if you just, you know, give us the opportunity, the goal is always to make sure that the information we provide to you is clear and precise so that when you're moving forward, you feel comfortable with the decisions that the board has to make.
No,
And I will add, I'm sorry, we did reach out to this complainant 5 times. We did make contact 3 of the 5 times, but she was still unable to give any specifics about her allegation, even though I know she stated that, but she was not able to give any specifics or recall
and so in that
why she felt it was, you know.
And so in that case, I think it might be helpful. And I understand the case as to why you wouldn't, but to then in that instance interview the officer that is in this complaint to basically try to surmise further information, and that officer could then provide the information that says, actually, we've been following through and we are taking this investigation seriously, you know, a statement or something, because right now it's literally just, we didn't get enough information from the complainant. Now, I understand there, it's like, it's insufficient, we're not getting the information we need, this is an administrative closure. But I do think from a process standpoint, there is only many times you can follow up with a complainant. I understand that, and with an officer, especially given all the dynamics and time constraints. But I do think whether it's through the DIG or through Civilian Police Review Board, we need to figure out a mechanism for people to be able to offer feedback for how their investigations went, whether it's a survey or open hearing opportunities. I just think right now there's not a lot of avenues for people to provide feedback for, hey, you all did a great job with our investigation, or hey, I'm not satisfied with how this process went. And I think as a review board, we should at least be hopefully an avenue for folks to be able to provide feedback, so then it's not just us asking questions versus emails, it's people coming in to your guys' office as well.
Sure. And Dr. Jones, I just wanted to circle back on your recommendation, hopefully respond and satisfy that. We actually, after further research, we actually did have that training in the last 12 months. She's actually supposed to come back within the next month. It is trauma-informed approach and victim engagement with Julia Long, Miss Julia Long from the City Attorney's Office, I believe. Okay?
May I ask the board their opinion? I'm just curious. When, because I am a bit stuck on this, the facts of this case. So just get the board's perspective. We have, an 11-year-old, is it 11 or 12?
12 in this.
12-year-old to whom obscenity was pandered by an adult. And an officer says, all that this complainant could come up with that was deemed insufficient by the IG's office was, well, she might be responsible for this. All right. When I hear that said to a 12-year-old, mother of a 12-year-old, for me, by definition, that's so inappropriate that I don't need more. But the IG's office definitely felt that that was insufficient, and she didn't have any other statements. Therefore, they closed it administratively. There wasn't anything else that she could say that, well, he called her a little whatever. But the very suggestion that a 12-year-old girl somehow, it sounds to me, I'm just struggling, it sounds to me like, well, you dress provocatively, without more. You did this, and somehow you're responsible in some way for having obscenity sent to you. So for me, that statement in of itself is completely inappropriate. But the IG feels otherwise and feels that this case warranted administrative closure and that there wasn't a need to continue. So I'm just wondering if the board is in agreement with the IG's perspective and could help me out with what am I missing here?
Just so I'm clear, it's not that the IG had a problem with this statement. I think it is that there wasn't a corroborating.
Well, what is she?
Camera.
The detectives don't wear a camera. So unless
Right.
she has a camera on the officer and she's not recording, so she's making the allegation. They asked her for more. She said, I don't have any more. They asked her for more again. She said, I don't have any more. This was the statement. And based upon that, that was deemed insufficient.
And the detective denied saying it.
So,
The detective was never interviewed.
No, the
Right,
detective
so-
did not
Gotcha,
deny saying
okay.
that.
so let me share something from the supervisor here. The issue with interviewing is that we are formulating an allegation against the officer during the interview because we don't know. If we don't have an allegation of misconduct, how can we compel them to appear and answer vague questions? That's speculation. We don't know he said that at all. There's no proof that that was said, and she didn't even say that that's exactly what she said, what he said when asked about it. That form of speculation damages credibility and, serves no one, basically.
How would she prove this?
It's not about proof. She didn't even, she's like, I think she was saying, like, she wasn't even sure if that's exactly what was said. She was like really,
Okay, I'm sorry, but that's not the way the report was written out.
It's written.
what's that?
That's not the way the report, the summary that.
Well, we state the allegation. The allegation is what the complainant initially says. We state that, right? And then we make follow-up calls to clarify. And she wasn't even sure that that was what was said. You're saying that that was not in the
Yeah,
report.
yes, precisely. And if you might permit me, if we take her statement simply as it is, without casting doubt on the statement, would that have resulted for you guys in an administrative closure? And do you all as a board agree with, yes, that should have resulted in an administrative closure? I'm just trying to get unstuck. I just wonder at what level we have detectives who don't wear body-worn cameras. People are not, I don't think we're allowed to record phone conversations. But most people don't record phone conversations, so what? Yeah, I just wonder, does the board think that, yeah, this appropriate, administrative closure is the appropriate thing, I'll move on. I'm just wondering, in this particular case, is that the way we want the IG to handle these things?
Well, she implied that it was the daughter's fault, but she didn't say that, or she said that the officer implied that it was the daughter's fault, not that he said that it was. And she just basically pointed to the officer's tone, and that was it. No specific issue. There's no question that the act against the child was egregious. But without her being able to, again, she said he implied it, but she couldn't give any, not proof, but she didn't recall or couldn't put any give us any words that were said,
Gotcha.
so that we can call the officer in.
So we don't
and
know
say, hey,
if he said, or if the officer said, so did you ask for these? Like, were you,
Right, it
like,
could have
there
been
wasn't a
something very-
specific statement, it's how she felt in the interaction?
Yes, ma'am.
Other board members have thoughts?
No, for me, I think that obviously if he, that implication, if he said it, that was wrong for him to say that. I think it seems like just hearing the case information, if she could not provide, well, I don't know if he really said that, or, there was no details. I think that is something that if she couldn't provide more. And she really didn't know if he said it like that. I think there's a lot of information that's not there. But again, if he did make the implication that, she had something to do with it, then yeah, I think that's egregious. She shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
So I see both sides, right? I see that, I see both sides of what IG said, and as well as Pastor Nathan.
Sure.
I think that's helpful. I think for this, at least personally, I think this warrants a further investigation. I mean, I think at the very least, a conversation with the potentially a conversation with the officer involved in this complaint, and/or just follow up from what happened. When I think this speaks to some of the challenges that I think about in terms of follow up, not just from the DIG's office, but even from CPD. So after these cases go through the CRB, and then they go, yeah, and we're going to go to that, right? And so it goes through all that, and then we don't really hear a lot of follow-up here. And so I think for this one in particular, to move us along, 641, if that's the case number, if I'm correct,
Yes.
is my recommendation would to actually send it back to the DIG for additional follow-up. And if you all say, hey, look, how many, we're only going to call them so many times or get so much information. I think that's also where it might be helpful to say, is this, just a simple outreach to CPD is like, is there an ongoing investigation here on this particular case?
I guess I have a question about
yeah.
that. So if the officer's denies saying it, right? And then the,
Well, we don't know that.
Wasn't
We can't even
interviewed.
call
he
the
was,
officer in.
he wasn't.
Yeah.
Oh,
We don't have anything to compel the officer to come in.
okay.
You know what I'm saying?
And then you attempted to reach out to the person 5
Yes, ma'am.
times.
It's the note says, the complainant stated she felt the officer was not taking the investigation seriously and was sexist by implying her daughter was at fault through the tone in his voice.
Okay.
She didn't, no, she
But
was,
we
she
know
was
the
saying that through
officer's
the
name,
tone.
correct? We
So
know
not
which
that he
officer.
said any specific words that were, accusatory of the daughter.
Well, and I think when you reach out to, I think the
I
idea.
think we have your answer. I mean, if you want to send us the
Well,
question.
I think
or
the
whatever.
idea here is because based on the supervisor in that case, that the idea was that, well, it ruins credibility if we reach out to officers and say, hey, there's a vague allegation against you. I understand that wholeheartedly.
And we,
I think-
questioning, we
but-
don't
but-
have any questions.
But a process, I think there's a process question, which is if there isn't, like, somebody has made an allegation that you all are not taking this investigation seriously. What I would like to know is if a complainant is navigating this, are there sole avenues of feedback through the DIG, or do they also have feedback through CPD? Because the idea here is that if a complainant is talking with CPD, a sergeant in this case, about a particular situation, and if they say they're not taking it seriously, I'm assuming that they're not just talking to the DIG about that, they're also sending that to CPD, or, that's what I'm trying to get an understanding of, is if you've closed this case, administrative closure, there has been communication potentially with this complainant. Was there follow-up? That's kind of the was that the end of it? You all said not enough information here, and that's the end of the conversation. Did they respond and say, actually, X, Y, and Z is going on, or they stopped the investigation? Because if there is an ongoing investigation, for example, to me, that does sound like they would be taking the investigation seriously because they're doing an ongoing investigation. But there's just not enough information here. So that's my follow-up, is just like, can we get some more information out of this case?
So, and I would echo that. I have a couple of comments as it pertains to this case. There was some talk about the mention of the credibility of the office and whatnot. And I think we have to remember the DIG's office was voted on by the public. It was established by the public. And because of that, I think we owe it to the public to ensure that there are thorough investigations that are conducted. At the same time, I think the officer involved in this, or the detective involved in this, also deserves the right to be heard. And so, because this is public record. And so I think it would be important or necessary for the DIG's office to go back and to just let the officer know this is the allegations that are being, that was made against you. Do you remember the interaction? What exactly was said? That could actually help clarify this entire conversation that we had here, that we spent so much time on. And I just think that that's just common sense. And so I would ask that the DIG does take this case back and just ask the officer what happened, just to let the officer tell their side of the story. And if the officer comes back and says, I said this and it aligns with it, or I said this and it doesn't align with it, then we know then that we can lay that to rest. I would also recommend that we do some follow-up to see if the adult involved was actually charged, because that provides a little bit more context. And then moving forward, I know you said you had the training with your office. I would recommend a deep dive into the learning objectives of that training, because what we have here is essentially a case of victim blaming, basically, and the inspectors should know what that looks like at its surface, and that should be a red flag to investigate. And so hopefully that is addressed in your training, and if not, hopefully, we can take a deeper dive to make sure that it's discussed very thoroughly, and that there also is some sort of assessment at that end of the training to make sure that, everybody does actually learn and retain that information that is being given. So those are the three recommendations that I have.
Noted. I definitely agree. We spent a lot of time on this unnecessarily. I don't know if those your other recommendations were noted in your original questions. I don't think that they were, but I do just, please beg you to submit these questions in advance. We have, I think we have all of the answers to your questions, other than, going back and not re-interviewing, but interviewing the officer. We'll look into that. Again, it's going to be hard to formulate questions off of something that's not really, we don't have any real evidence or proof or even statement from the complainant. But we will look at that. But yes, I just, really beg you all to please submit these questions in advance. So we want you to come here prepared. We want to do what we can to help out always, so that we don't spend this time. You can come here and then vote on it. But us trying to answer questions, on the fly, so to speak. It's just, usually we can answer most of them, but, we want you to come fully prepared, and we want to be fully prepared. So if we can just do that, I would ask that, please.
I will share that there'll be a training on January 20th from both the collective bargaining and also apparently I'm doing an interview training that Ms. Ross used to do, and she shared her slides with me, and I'll be refining those. So this topic will absolutely be discussed at the training on January 20th with the entire DIG.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got 3 recommendations, just to make sure we have a clean record. Could I have each of those as motions? I'm going to restate them for the notes. So first is to return case number 25-0641 to the IG's office. It looks like there are still a little over 40 days remaining on the 90-day timeline for that. Specifically to return to collect additional information, interviewing the officer in question about whether he recalls the event, if so, if he recalls any statements made to the complainant. Second, as part of the motion, to follow up and see whether the adult involved was actually charged, because that could provide additional context. I'm going to separate out from that the recommendation on a deep dive into the learning objectives of the training referenced, given Mr. Tobias's statement about a training coming up on the 20th. Would someone like to officially make that a motion?
Yes.
Those 2 recommendations.
So I move that the DIG's office reopen the investigation 2025-041 to specifically interview the officer to ask him or her about that incident and what specifically happened, to provide more context. And you want them separately?
No, it can be the
Okay.
same one. I just didn't want the training one.
Okay. And then the second is, what was the second investigation?
Charged or status
Oh, yes,
of the
the follow-up
investigation.
to see if the adult was charged. I moved to the DIG do an investigation to see if the adult was included or charged.
Second. Oh, there you go.
All right?
Yes.
Please raise your hands.
Give that to Nathan.
Motion carries.
He wanted that.
All right, next, the other pending case that we had was 25-0586. In my notes, I had that this was one of the last cases reviewed by combined committees 2 and 3. Is that correct? Does anyone have a note?
They don't have that for us.
All right, we'll take a moment, or I'll take a moment and look for that. In the alternative, or I guess moving forward, I'll turn to Committee 1 for the cases for December.
Okay. The cases for December, I'm going to put them into 3 categories, 3 buckets. The first are going to be the cases in which we'll move to accept the DIG's findings. The second will be where the DIG added a count, and we agreed with that. And the third would be where we agreed with the DIG's findings, but we did have some questions regarding some follow-up for the DIG. So I'm going to start with case 25-0714. These are the cases where we agree with the DIG's findings and are going to move to accept their findings. 25-0714, 25-0853, 25-0855, 25-0873, 25-0891, and 25-0927. And in those cases, I moved to accept the DIG's findings. Our subcommittee was unanimous in accepting the findings.
Any second? We've got a second. Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor of accepting those cases as recommended, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I have a second motion to, in 25-0853, in which the DIG added a count of, let's see if I can find that quickly, sorry. Curious about that. They added a count that the police filed an inaccurate police report in this domestic violence claim, and we concurred with the DIG's findings. So I move to accept the DIG's additional count in 25-0853.
Second.
Okay, any questions? Okay, all in favor of accepting the additional IG recommendation as written, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? Any opposed? Okay,
And third, in 2025-0700, this was a case involving an error in identifying a suspect. And we agreed with, we concurred with the DIG's findings in that case, and I think I mentioned it before. But we did have a few follow-up questions, and that is, one of the follow-up questions that we have to the DIG is, how do we follow up on prior policy recommendations? Where, how can we get that information? So, for example, a few months ago, our committee recommended that there be some kind of verification of addresses, so that we don't simply drive up to the wrong house, smash the door in, and it was as a result of a wrong Google search without checking the mailbox or the house number on the house. In this case, we had a similar kind of policy recommendation. How are errors in identifying a suspect handled in the past, and how can we follow up? But first, let me just start with the first question. How can we find out how policy recommendations, whether they've been heard, accepted, what stage they are in the CPD pipeline, to know, how those are going?
so I can share a little bit, and we received this email from Stephanie. Oh, goodness. I can't find the date, but specific to the confirming the address, it looks like the chain of command received our recommendation, and Chief Bryant concurred that officers need to ensure that they're at the correct location when attempting to serve a warrant. While GPS applications can be valuable tools, officers must confirm that they're conducting warrant service at the proper address. So Research and Development Unit Sergeant, their last name, has been directed to revise the relevant policy to ensure that personnel are explicitly instructed to verify a suspect's location before initiating warrant service. And so division policies, so that was updated, and it was supposed to have taken effect in Q4 of 2025, or at the earliest Q1 2026. I don't have confirmation that it has yet, but it looks like there was at least an acknowledgement of what the board was concerned about with the GPS and warrant searches.
So, Chair Burns, is our current approach more of an ad hoc approach? That is, when we make a policy, a policy recommendation, will get an email like that, or would these be gathered up in, say, a quarterly report? I think for me, that would be great if we had, some sort of quarterly report in which there were 3 policy recommendations. Here's what they were. It would just give us, I think, as a board, a sense of forward momentum that we're actually, as a result of your recommendations, here's what's going on. And we could see them collected. So I'm just,
I think it is kind of ad hoc. I mean, we do get CPD quarterly reports, which sometimes includes policy recommendations from that quarter that the board has made, and that they are either reviewing that potential policy recommendation. That's also sometimes included in the DIG reports. But in terms of like the database of where that's stored, that's in a bunch of your emails somewhere, right? So I do think having either in our website, CPRB's website, or DIG having kind of a database where you can access these materials consistently would be helpful. If that's a capacity concern, or if that's a data management or skill set or capacity issue, then we should talk about how we can support you all, because that should not just be on the DIG. I think as a board, perhaps we have that on our website somewhere.
Well, and our website was updated recently, and I know our minutes and agendas are there. I don't know that it would be that hard of a lift to add the quarterly reports in and of themselves, but Stephanie does send them to us as a board. I just think it might get lost in the emails that everybody gets.
Having a section with the policy recommendations and where there are big
Especially so the public can see that.
I was going to say, I know that the board gets the quarterly, because I know CPD has implemented, so they provide. What we can do, if that's helpful, is, I know, again, because it probably gets lost in the email, we can put it on the agenda so that when we get that quarterly review back from CPD, we can just make it a point to just maybe talk about it at the board meeting, so you are aware of it. But I know that CPD does do the quarterly, and I know from the last meeting that I had with CPD, the recommendations that are coming back from the board, CPD is making sure that the chain of command looks at those recommendations and that they are addressed so that they're not overlooked. But again, if that's very helpful, I mean, we could definitely put it on the website, but if it's more helpful when we get the quarterlies back to put those on the agenda and then talk about it, we can make sure we do that. And we'll just let Stephanie, what we're putting in our minutes. So we'll just
Sure.
add that to the agenda too.
Okay, thank you.
There was a second question. Have we sufficiently covered that question? The second question was, how have errors in identifying a suspect been handled in the past? That is, what is the policy there for CPD?
I believe, if I'm answering your question, I think the last recommendation, Chair Burns provided that they were looking into if there's something additional that you're asking for. Based on this report, we probably would have quoted what the policy is, but I do remember that the last incident that involved some officers responding and using the GPS mapping and arriving at the wrong location.
No, this wasn't an address. This is, they identified the wrong suspect. So it's a similar situation, but not, they had, what did they do? Punch in, was it a license in this case?
was a
I think he put in the wrong numbers. It was like an officer in training, put in the wrong numbers into the leads or something like that, arrested the wrong person.
Yeah, and I think this is a data or patterns and practice question, which is, either we can submit to CPD or you all can kind of submit a request to CPD in terms of how often does this occur? What do you do in these situations? Is discipline warranted in this particular situation? Like those are the things that I think we are curious. We've seen it. We've seen cases, but,
Similar ones. We just didn't know. What we're looking for specifically is, do we need to make a policy recommendation or not?
Sure.
But we don't have the information upon which, is this 1 in a billion situation, or is this, no, this is happening, with some frequency, and what are they doing about it? And they may have great policies in place, and they're already handling it. We just don't have that information.
So what I will always say that I think is great with the board is that any time, so in this incident, again, we did recommend sustained misconduct, but I was saying anytime the board is looking at something, especially if you know that you've seen a complaint that has came across that we've investigated, where an incident has happened more than once, anytime you want to recommend a policy be revised or looked at, I would always say that's great, because keep in mind, complaints that we get are only complaints where a citizen has filed a complaint with our office.
Sure.
We would never know if this incident has happened before. So again, obviously, getting a complaint tells us that it probably has happened before. So the recommendation for the board, I think, is always a great thing for CPD.
So our question is for you to ask CPD, what is their, how frequently do cases like this occur? And what is their, practice when these things occur? Do they have a policy in place or not? If they don't, we'll make a policy recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say from our office, Board Member Nathan, that we have not seen a pattern of this type of mistake occurring.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, they're getting something else, but just,
Yeah, sure.
but yeah, we will definitely research that and
Okay.
and get back to you.
Thank you. And so I've made,
You got it?
I think that's it.
That's it?
Okay. Do we still need a motion on that case, though?
We'll make a motion.
Oh, 2025-0700, we move to accept the DIG's findings.
Second.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, all in favor of accepting, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, turning it over to Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair Burns. Board Member Younger and I met on December 22nd at 6 o'clock for Committee 2 cases to be read. And all of ours are just in one bucket that we'll move these cases for approval after our review. Cases 2025-0139, case 2025-0196, case 2025-0773, case 2025-0798, case 2025-0818, case 2025-0838, and case 2025-0988. Our committee reviewed these cases, and we agree with the recommendation of the DIG and move for approval.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Any questions? Okay, all in favor of accepting as written, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, turning to Committee 3.
Afternoon. So Committee 3 met, and we reviewed the cases. And we voted to and agreed with the IG on cases numbers 250764, 250831, 250846, 250909, 250918, 250921. We also agreed with the findings of the IG with 250946, but what we did do was ask to review the BWC footage. We agreed with the findings, and this call originated from a 10-year-old girl who made the call stating that because let me go back, the complaint was officers came to the wrong residence with the apartment number clearly posted. And the second allegation was officers came to the wrong residence with the weapons drawn. So the call originated from a 10-year-old girl who made this phone call stating that there was a woman who had a weapon, was going to harm themselves. The young girl did give the address, and so the officers were dispatched to the address that was given. But what we were curious about when Pastor Jones and I went to look at the BWC was the fact that, yes, they came to the address they was dispatched to. The woman kind of opened the door and they were like, "Hey, your 10-year-old daughter," and she said, "I don't have kids." And they said, and then she just said the address 202. And so she kind of cracked the door. So they went up to the other address directly above. There were young kids there, but the adult came to the door and said it wasn't them. And we were more curious because when we read the report, I guess we at first was wondering if we couldn't tell from the report if the original address that was given, if that woman really did have a young child there, because that was the address that was given. But she gave the address that was up above, and they really couldn't determine who made that call after it was all said and done. Once we reviewed the BWC, it was never determined who actually made the report. So we did agree with the findings in 250946. The report initially just did not give us enough information as far as, if in fact there was a kid around, because that was a serious complaint. Not a part of the complaint, but that was a serious part of the report, I guess, is that they came with the weapons drawn because of the allegation, So we did agree with the finding of the Inspector General in that case as well.
Quick question, did you get the information you were looking for from?
We
what-
did. Once
What
we
was the
reviewed-
answer?
Well, kind of, right? So we knew that when they went to the first address, we saw that the woman said that she didn't have any children. Because I think initially, Pastor Jones and I was like, was there really a child in there? And she didn't say, we didn't know. And we seen that they went to the second address. That adult stated everybody was fine, that they did not have a 10-year-old. They had some younger kids, but they did not have a 10-year-old. So again, the complaint was a complaint, and we agreed with kind of unfounded because we didn't really know where that caller came from. Could have been an older kid saying there was 10. We didn't really know. I guess that was our biggest thing, is that we really didn't know what happened when they went upstairs by reading the report.
Yeah.
And then once we seen the BWC, the adults stated they were fine and no one in that house made the phone call.
I did have a question. After reviewing the BWC, and it's not in the complaint, I just had a question. How often do CPD take de-escalation training? Reason why I asked, because the young lady that they thought made the call and they came to the wrong address after they left, because they had their guns drawn, it was very intense. She felt a little threatened a little bit. She didn't handle it the right way. She was cussing and very irate. And the officers, how they responded, I understand, why they responded like they did, but I was just curious because I believe that it probably could be handled another way. Now, given this is an intense moment, I understand policy, you can have your guns drawn, but I just was curious, how often do they do de-escalation training?
Yeah, the woman in the original address, she was,
Yeah.
extremely upset. Like she continued even when they were at the second address, to the fact that she was like in the stairway, still cussing, screaming, back and forth. And again, I think because she wasn't happy that they came to the door with the guns drawn, but the original, the call was, it was a gun run.
Yeah.
So we understand policy, but yeah.
Yeah, this is another question I have because these questions bring up points around. I'm not sure why no officers were interviewed in this case. Because when you read the complaint, it seems like, it was just wrong address, but it was handled and everything was within policy. There's no mention of all this other commotion that was happening after they go up to the second floor, that this complainant, and the reason that I'm assuming more commotion was happening is because this person filed a complaint because they felt the interaction was not appropriate in some way. And so I am kind of curious as to why no officers were interviewed here, but then to your point around de-escalation, how could this have been handled differently? Because there are scenarios in which this could have gone a lot worse than it ultimately did.
If we could, Pastor Jones's question initially, how often do officers receive de-escalation training? And I imagine Mr. Tobias, you might know, or Mr. Furby, who's not here, we could ask that.
I was going to say, I know from Jeff, he does in-service training basically all year round. It's just the different topics. And so I believe they try to hit every officer once a year. It may be every other year, but it's frequent enough. It's not every 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's at least every year, if not maybe every other year for those
Yeah,
trainings.
I think in this case too, it was oddly the second address they went to, the adult and everyone was
pretty calm.
extremely, okay, yeah, we're fine, yeah, no problem. And then, the kids started asking, do you have stickers? But the first address, she did not let it go. I mean, she continued through the whole footage. But it took us really to see the BWC to see how angry she was.
Absolutely.
Because she was angry from start to finish.
For clarification, when the call was made, what address? Because I can't really understand here. What address did they say?
The kid gave the right direct. The 10-year-old that said it was supposed to be the caller. The 10-year-old gave the first address. She gave the exact address to. That's what was given. So they went to the address they was dispatched to.
But it was the wrong
of
address.
course-
So it was the wrong
well,
address.
That's what the woman said. It was the wrong address. Now, do we know if there was a 10-year-old in there who said it? We don't know that. She just said 202. She didn't open the door. She just said, she cracked the door. She just said 202, which is the apartment directly above hers. Yes, they did have kids. They wouldn't have a 10-year-old. But again, it wasn't really confirmed if the first address had a 10-year-old inside. We didn't know or not. We didn't know.
And so I guess kind of a policy question. If somebody then, they go to the address, they go to 102, and then somebody says, actually 202. And then the officers just go to 202 with that information? I mean,
Well, that's that's what happened. That's why we wanted to see, because it would just seem like there was information. It wasn't clear to us reading the report. But that's exactly what happened. They went to 102, she cracked the door and said 202, like she didn't have a kid, 202. And then they went to 202. They did have young kids, and then they said they were fine.
and is that kind of standard practice if you go to an address and then somebody says, just gives you a number, and then they then go to that address, taking the word of the person that they just went to? Because, 202 nothing was going on at 202, is my understanding.
Nothing.
So I'm
You're
curious
saying
what the practice.
it wasn't enough investigation with the first address, right? Just
Yeah, I mean, it's like somebody just said, I came here and somebody said, oh, it's actually a different address, and then they go to that address. That's all the information that they got, and so I just don't know if that's a standard practice or not, or if there was enough evidence, or if that was maybe the circumstances warranted they had to move quickly.
To answer to your question, the officers responding to the second location was within policy, because we look at the whole circumstances to verify. And due to the nature of the run as to why they were responding, they took that information and did respond. And I mean, it's 102, 202, maybe figuring that whoever the caller was might have said 102, but it could, that's reasonable. So yeah, the officers, their actions was within policy. And the other question that was asked was the de-escalation training. The officers do go through training annually, but I do know, and this would definitely be a question that if you want to have CPD come in, that they do have additional training that officers do go through, which is recommended by different command levels based on different incidents that officers may be involved in. So yes, the question would be annually, do they go through training? Yes. And based on incidents, just like we find sustained misconduct, the command level might sustain misconduct and provide recommendations that officers go for additional training, so.
And just because I want to draw a distinction, so I think when I think of de-escalation, frequently it's tied to use of force, which is how do we de-escalate from where a encounter is right now to something lower. I think that the post-encounter space, which is what it sounds like the woman was still pretty upset, pretty terrified. I feel like that might be a slightly different module, for lack of a better term, and I don't know that there is, and we discovered this with the Safety Commission, just as there is no post-incident kind of cool-off period for the officers, I don't know that there exists the same thing for citizens when like a mistaken identity thing happens. And I'd love to hear, and maybe Mr. Tobias, we could ask Mr. Furby, if he's willing to tell us if there's been any changes in that, because I don't know that there has been. I know we don't have it for officers. There's optional options for officers to go get that sort of intervention, but there's no requirement. Like, had a really bad interaction on a shift, now you can go get this kind of like decompression wellness thing. And I don't believe we have that for citizens, but I'm open to be corrected if it exists.
Yeah, when we had our little panel up in the short north, there was a citizen in the audience who was pretty explicit about how officers need that type or should have that type of option available to them for decompression, if you will. I just texted Jeff about the de-escalation, though. I'm waiting to hear back.
Perfect, thank you.
He's a busy guy. I'm
Yep.
hoping he'll
Nope,
text me before
understood.
the end of this meeting. Yeah.
Understood.
So Kyle, to answer your question, I don't know if that's practice.
Yeah.
As far as if you go from 102, oh, no, it's not here, it's upstairs. But if I look at the complaint, that's what we're saying. We was looking into that, but if I look at the complaint itself, and they were called to that address with their guns drawn because it was a gun call, yes, we agree. But we did have questions about the other as well, so.
Yeah, because there's no, to me, there was no resolution here, right? Because they went to 202 and no one at 202, if I'm reading this correctly, said that they called either. And so at no, I guess is the end of the follow-up, like somebody called us and we're not really sure where the call came from?
Yeah, it appeared it was, like I said, a 10-year-old girl, and said that actually the woman was in the yard with a gun.
Yeah, like,
Come to 102, so they did come to where they was, where the caller gave them. But again, we felt the same that, okay, they went to 202 now. Okay, but who really made the call? We really didn't get that answer.
yeah, because I think that I understand that there was a decision made not to interview the officers here in this case because there was sufficient evidence to show. But in this case, somebody called about somebody with a gun in the yard. They are then dispatched to the location that they said on this call. The person opens the door and says, no, I don't have a kid here. I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe 202. They run up to 202. 202 says, nothing here. We have kids here, but no one made any sort of call. And then throughout this process, the person at 102 is still complaining about officers just came in, I believe guns drawn. I don't know, weapons drawn out of caution. But at no point was there follow-up about that call that was made. The concern I have is whether this is if there's somebody who made a prank call or if this is a real call. And if it were a real potential call of something happening, it does not seem to be the situation was resolved in any sort of way.
Looking at BWC, one of the things that the officers wanted to make sure of was everybody was okay. And the first one, like I said that, well, she wasn't even acknowledging anything there, but the second family said they were okay. So I don't know if that was their resolve, but that's what we got in the footage.
And was there any further conversation with 102 to say, hey, we want to check in?
She wasn't calling. She wasn't going to hear it. She was completely just upset about the fact that they were at their door, guns drawn.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. The board could go with that. I mean, I just kind of seemed like the situation didn't really get resolved there, other than a complaint has been made, and now we're saying that.
Well, remind me what the allegations were from.
The allegations were officers came to the wrong residence with the apartment number clearly posted, but that was the apartment that was given on the call. And the officers came to the wrong residence with the weapons drawn. But again, that's what the caller said. I'm at 102, and it was a gun call. So it was within policy as far as the complaint. Is the other stuff that was kind of, that's why we kind of want to, watch the BWC, because there was things that wasn't really answered for us.
And it may be part of that de-escalation, or maybe a separate kind of thing, is really kind of how they handle these types of situations. Obviously approaching with caution, but then also what do you do in a situation where there's a wrong or there's, you know, there, I know there's this thing like swatting and things like that where people make an allegation that something's happening at an address and they have to respond. Like, what does the follow-up look like? Because it seems here the follow-up conversations, maybe the complainant wasn't having it, but I'd be interested just to make sure that those situations are handled well after the fact, because ultimately she filed a complaint because she didn't feel it was handled well. And so, and here's the importance of interviewing officers. To Dr. Jones' point earlier, I think basically it is, you were named in this complaint, and there are allegations made against you. You have the opportunity to respond, and they would, in this instant, respond with their side of this situation, the story. I think only interviewing the complainant and reviewing the BWC, I understand from a time management and capacity perspective why that makes sense, but I do think we miss critical details and an opportunity for the officer to provide that response, so that when this investigation is completed, and then we provide that to the CPRB chain of command, and back to the complainant, they know that their investigation was thoroughly investigated, and there was a finding of unfounded and exonerated here. So I just, I've seen consistently, and I know this isn't the standard practice, but of cases where it's just the complainant that's interviewed and not the officer involved. And I think it warrants, does everybody a good thorough process to have both the officer either interviewed or emailed or reached out to in some way, so that we can get this information in their side of the story.
So my question would be, if we interviewed the officer, what additional information would we, in this case, would the board have looked for us to have? Because the allegation was that the complainant is alleging the officers responded to the wrong address. The officers, based on the information, the CAD report did respond to the location that was given to them. And so we were able to resolve what the complaint is. So we do understand that the complainant was upset. I mean, but we were able to answer. One of the things that the board stated that we know is not a policy, but probably would be something good, and I think the board has recommended before, is there some type of follow-up that CPD does when, in fact, an incident like this happens that is, you know, for them? I mean, because the officers in the process of responding to such run like this, the goal is to make sure if there is somebody that has a gun or someone, you know, that they're responding, which is why, based on the information, they responded to the second. So we do interview the officers when we need additional information, but if we're basically able to make the determination, again, we just really look at what the allegation is. Are we able to make the determination based on the information to be able to resolve, not just the allegation, because we look at the whole circumstance from the time that the incident occurred to the time that the incident ended. Was everything that the officer did within policy and procedure? And we do add those policies and procedures in the report so that, again, the board can kind of review that. So if you have a question, but it's, you know, again, we feel the investigations are thorough. We can always interview the officer, but interviewing the officer just for the officer to say, hey, you know.
Isn't always sufficient, given.
Well, in this case, the officer is basically going to say, I got, this was the call, this was the run. We responded. Once we were responding, we realized that we were at the wrong location. We got some more information. So this is the reason we responded to the other. So we were able to answer what the complaint is. But I will say again, there are times that, if a case is involving why someone stops somebody, if somebody is making the allegation, which I think you had a report where the person is alleging that the reason the stop was based on the person being biased. That's not something we can see on a camera. So we kind of have to ask the officer, even though we're able to sometimes on the camera see why you stop. the person, if they stop the person for maybe running a red light. We're able to see that, but based on the allegation, we can't make that interpretation. So we do bring the officer in to answer that question.
Well, and that's super helpful. And I understand from a capacity, time management perspective, also you have the sufficient evidence available. Perhaps in this instance, it's just additional information from maybe the CAD report, because I am curious how this ended, like how CPD documented how this situation ended, beyond just the body worn camera footage, because you have body worn camera footage that reviews the whole situation, but then the officers are going to file, their report and fill that out. And so that information was included in the documents you've reviewed. And so I want to be very clear, like the DIG, the investigators, you're not just looking at the BWC and the complainant or even an officer interview, you're also looking at the CAD reports and all those details. But from this report, there isn't information that I'm sure could be illuminated from that CAD report of like, we were given an address that was the wrong address. We went to another address. There wasn't anything happening. We assessed the situation and determined that there was, like, I don't know how CPD ended this whole, they closed this report out. I don't know if they made a determination of it was a prank call or there was just, I don't know. Like, but because to me, it does seem pretty relevant that they didn't find out who ultimately made that call.
Yeah, but why is that relevant in relation to whether or not the
Right,
allegation is sustained or not?
That's what I was just.
Here's what I'll say. So their lane is, here's the allegation, we need to investigate the allegation and make a decision. That's kind of the lane they stay in. After you as a board member review the report and make a determination as to whether, to sustain the findings, whatever, you have the ability to ask other questions if there's things that you want to know as a board related to pattern, practice, policy, so that you can make recommendations to the police. So, but the proper, I think, thing to do there is either individually or as a collectively as a board to then email or however you communicate with the DIG saying, this is a little bit now, I want to talk about pattern, practice, policy. Here's some additional information that I need so that I can bring it up at the next board meeting to discuss it with the board to determine if we're going to then make a recommendation to CPD about what happened here. So it's just two different lanes. One is the investigation, but the other is pattern, practice, policy. I think that the IG initially is just looking at the investigation, the allegation, were they outside of policy? The secondary part, which you may, as a board, bring up, is perfectly legitimate to raise. It's just a second kind of inquiry.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And I totally understand separating that out. I guess the question I would have is, so there's our board, we have the process of policy review, patterns of practice. My understanding, though, is that the DIG's office is also looking at patterns and practices. And so perhaps we can figure out a better way to get this information across. But like, to me, this may not be, there may not be any patterns or practices here, but like, that is a curious point that either we address to you all or we address to CPD of like how they handle these types of situations. So I don't know, that maybe that's a second line of inquiry. But I'm curious as to how this situation was resolved, basically.
And I was just going to say, I do think we're hitting a distinction in that the complainant here is maybe the person we don't believe about there being a 10-year-old child in the room, right? That is not the end question to the complaint that is in this case. I know we may be very concerned about a 10-year-old inside that address calling because there's allegedly a woman with a gun on the yard, right? But that is the resolution of that being true or not is a separate issue from the underlying complaint in the case. And so I recognize why we might be concerned about it, just as citizens, and like wondering, well, where's the 10-year-old? And is the 10-year-old safe? And was the woman who answered the door the person with the gun that the 10-year-old was alleging? I get that.
We went down a rabbit hole.
Yes, but that is, and I making sure that from a standpoint of having a clean, how does this case follow? I do think we need to separate any questions about, well, what do officers do when you have this mystery outstanding at the end of a call?
Well, I think it's relevant in the sense of how somebody's complaint was handled, right? Which is, to me, if I'm a complainant and this is the final report that you receive, then is that sufficient? I mean, I might have some follow-up questions. And again, I think this speaks to how complainants or officers receive the investigation process and how they receive how the CPRB and CPD handles investigations. Like, because to me, there is no feedback loop as to whether or not, I believe these are thoroughly done, but there is not a feedback loop. And so perhaps we can keep it as a second line of inquiry, but it would be relevant if the response is, yes, this is standard practice and, you know, this is what we do in these situations. Like, that's all I'm asking as to why I think that question is relevant. And I don't think that solely is on the DIG. I think our job as a review board is also to make sure we're getting that feedback from residents, from officers, from complainants, so forth.
So Committee 3, we've got agreements on cases 250764, 250831, 250846, 250909, 250918, 250921, and 250946. Would someone like to formally make that a motion to accept?
Move.
Okay, may I have a second, please? Any additional questions? All right, all in favor of accepting, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, I will turn our attention to case number 2025-0586. I pulled it up, and here's what initially happened. When this case was first submitted to us, the allegations were combined into one. However, after, and I can't remember which subcommittee or committee initially reviewed it, the
was
IG
number
decided to, was it one?
I think.
Okay, because I had it as two.
Maybe it's two.
I think it's two.
Yeah.
Okay, it was.
But they
Stephanie sent
split it
to
into
us.
two
All right, all right.
recommendations,
Yeah, she
or
sent it,
two
correct.
allegations instead. So for time and purpose, I'd like to read out the summary, because we've heard it before, but it's now split into two, and then we can take a vote if someone would like to make a motion. So this is case number 25-0586, stemming from a July 2025 case, which the DIG received a complaint in which the complainant alleged that an officer refused to take a police report. And then second, the separated out allegation is that the officer told him to wait, or he was told to wait until the next shift to file the report. The IG's investigation consisted of telephone interviews, the complainant, review of CAD data, review of BWC footage, review of the police report, a review of applicable CPD policies, and an in-person interview with the officer involved. Concerning allegation 1, the DIG found that the officer completed a police report. Therefore, it is recommended that that allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. However, regarding allegation 2, the DIG's investigation found evidence to sustain this allegation. Therefore, it's recommended that the allegation 2 be closed with a finding of sustained. And so the incident just concerned the complainant saying that they wanted to have a protection order, or that the complainant was irritated after being told about a protection order issued against him. That person said he wanted to file a police report. The officer stated that he did tell the complainant to wait until the next shift to file the report, and acknowledged that there was no good reason for telling the complainant that. The officer stated that he has dealt with the complainant several times, had familiarity with him, and then stated that he perceived that a police report would be taken at some point. So the sustaining of the allegation was the admonition to the complainant that the report should be filed in the next shift instead of this one. So as a result, the IG, the first allegation was unfounded, the second was sustained. Does anyone have any questions about it? No. Okay, and I don't think there was a lot of discussion when it was first presented. It's simply that they were two separate and asked to be separated into two different allegations. All right, do I have a motion to accept these findings as given?
So moved.
Okay, may I have a second, please? Second. All right, all in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, let's take a 10-minute break, and we can come back for the conclusion of remaining agenda items. All right, we'll be back at 3:54. If there's any specific periods. We can have some of those discussions about, are there other processes or policy discussions we'd like to have? Or are there other things within your committees that you've seen as patterns that we would like to take a deeper look at? So I'll open the floor for that conversation.
Well, I always have some policy questions, but I wanted to give some time if anybody else had any things that they wanted to add. Maybe I'll just start. So look, I think that one of the consistent things that we've seen over the last however many years I've been on the Civilian Review Board is that there's a lot of responsibility that falls on the DIG's office, right? And I think as a board, it is also a challenge because we are an all-volunteer board in terms of how do we think about like getting the patterns and practices, getting these sorts of follow-ups so that we can have consistent information to then have some sort of feedback on what impact is the Civilian Police Review Board making. And I think I'd like this board either, do something with the council or make a recommendation to the mayor's office in terms of maybe getting an outside researcher or consultant or somebody who can help provide additional capacity either to the Department of Inspector General or to the Civilian Police Review Board to compile and collect a lot of this information. Maybe we combine it with the data management person that needs the skills to do Tableau, but there's just so much information that we are consuming that it's really hard for the Department Inspector General to take the step back to be able to actually analyze all that data. And certainly as a review board, while we try to do our working groups and our committees, we're all volunteer. And so I would put out some sort of request that, and I don't know what processes we would do this through, that we actually provide some sort of funding or outside support to get some more robust analysis of this board's impact. So I just want to start that discussion. I don't have specifics on what that looks like, but I think it would, even just a survey of residents, of officers, of how their experiences with CPD, their experience with the CRB, their experience with whatever that ringtone was. I think any of that would be helpful to just have some follow-up for.
Anyone have any thoughts or suggestions based on Board Member Strickland's recommendation?
I think that's a good suggestion. The board has been in operation for how many years now?
4
4, 5?
Almost 5.
July 2021?
Okay, we're
Yeah, almost
on
5.
the 5th year.
Close
So
to
I think
5, yeah, it's been quite a long time.
it's been a ride. It's definitely been a ride.
These guys are wearing down from us.
So I think some kind of, evaluation into, what's been done. I think it's warranted. I think it's a good recommendation, suggestion.
Yeah, I concur. I think the motivation for many of us in joining the Civilian Review Board was to see incremental change, and that's, reviewing the cases is important, and the citizens voted for this in order to have a voice in, having some independent space to review complaints outside of the chain of command. And so that was really important. But from the boards, at least for me, it was the opportunity to perhaps begin to see, some policy changes that would benefit the community. And when that happens, it feels like a win for us. But those come few and far between because we don't have capacity. So.
What is City Council's involvement with the Civilian Police Review Board? Do we have a process in place, or?
I think their main involvement was the initial appointments. I think the mayor got a handful and council got a handful, and then they did one jointly for chair. Other than that, I'm thinking I'd have to double check the code, but the reappointments, I think, have to go through new appointments, reappointments have to go through council. Let me take a look.
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, because I think like there's some potential opportunities for more council involvement when we think about capacity, right? They've got their various committees, they've got staffers that can look at, public safety and some other aspects of this that I think, figuring out a way, maybe it's the chair or the vice chair, have a more ongoing discussions with the chair of those committees. Obviously, we have a new council member who just was previously heavily involved in the CPRB, so I know that they will be interested. But I just think that would be a useful piece, because as we've seen, you all are trying to work with all the different departments and things like that. It can be a long process, and so I'd like to just kind of get different players involved who can maybe hopefully help speed up this process.
Board Member Strickland, it does say in 235.01A, shall consist of 11 members appointed by the mayor with the approval of city council.
Okay.
So they approve all appointments and reappointments.
Great, thank you.
And I would just like to note that we do have a couple applications that have been submitted. I'd love to hear any updates. and would love to see some more applicants as well.
I can provide some information
Sure,
about
Mr.
terms
Pies.
whenever you want me to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ms. Harrell and I are kind of working cooperatively here since it's our first full meeting. But right now, there's currently 3 vacancies. Pastor Nathan, Board Member Strickland, and Mary Younger will be up as of April 30th of this year. The code uses language indicating that members shall hold their seat on the board until their successors are chosen, qualified, and installed. So there's a mechanism for you to stay. But as we were talking about previously, you can always resign. You don't have to stay on. So I think as we move into the February meeting, it would be helpful for you to think about that over the next month to kind of give some indication to the chair whether you intend to stay on until the successors are named or not, because that will kind of determine how many vacancies there are ultimately. And then, Dr. Ford, your first term is up also April 30th of this year, so you need to decide if you want to be reappointed for a second term. If you don't, then obviously that would create a vacancy as well. So potential of up to 4 additional vacancies come April. So just, April will be here before you know it, so just important to think about those things. You know, the one thing that kind of doesn't sit well with me is the board members shall hold their seat until their successors are chosen, right? But the code also says may not serve more than 2 terms consecutively. So what if you can't identify people to serve, to fill, and the board member Strickland want to stay, they could potentially stay for another 3 years, which would be another term. So there's got to be some give there. I think there needs to be a good faith effort to find replacements. But if people from the community won't step up and don't want to do it, what do you do? So I'm going to research that a little bit and look into that because obviously it's not anticipated that the current members would be staying on for a long, it's just to help for the transition. So.
Is there a marketing campaign, or is there somebody that we can reach out to start a marketing campaign to solicit applications for board?
So I know previously Chair Burns has kind of reached out to Laura and I, and then we kind of escalated it through the mayor's office and city council for them to kind of extend their arms out. Other than that, I'm not aware of. I would imagine if there was some sort of marketing campaign, that would likely come from the mayor's office or city council.
So in terms of any additional policy, so one also when I was out, but very want to shout out this board for getting the virtual meeting policy through. That was great. Great job. Great work on that, everybody. I approve. But in terms of like, just trying to think through, are there any other policies, and I don't know, Attorney Tobias, in terms of in terms of how we've been operating that we could either think about changing or getting council involved, whether there's different ordinances that we should be looking at to update after 5 years of doing this, like, are there other steps? So one example I think about is this membership, the vacancy, is that in the code, or like where is, okay, so like how we handle that vacancy process, because I think that is not, I mean, that should get revised in some way or looked at, because the way it is right now, if we all decided, yeah, we're gonna resign, then you have 4 additional vacancies on top of the other vacancies that haven't been.
6.
Right, so that's 6 vacancies. So got to figure out some sort of process there, I think.
Yeah, I see. Anytime you're going to suggest a code change, you need to talk with folks at city council to see whether they have an appetite for that code change.
Got it. That's helpful. All right, well, we should call back city council and say, hey.
Can I also, since you brought up the virtual meeting, if I may, if committees are going to start using that virtual meeting policy, just please make sure to remember that those have to be open meetings. They have to comply with the terms and conditions of that virtual meeting policy, which most importantly, I would say, includes notice. Stephanie needs to provide notice, which is going to also then need to include links to Zoom, WebEx, whatever teleconferencing medium you're using. Additionally, I can't imagine with a 3-person committee, you're going to have some people meeting in person, someone else meeting virtually. But if that were to occur, you also need to include where the physical meeting space is and the virtual login credentials so that someone can choose whether they want to come to the physical site or participate virtually. So if you have any questions about, implementing the virtual meeting policy moving forward, just reach out to Sarah and I, and we can help with that.
That's great.
Thank you. I do want to take a second, since we just talked about membership, to go back to approval of the minutes, because we started and we did not have quorum, because we actually do have 8 board members right now.
Right.
So if someone would like to move again for approval of the minutes from last meeting, I would accept that motion.
So moved.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of accepting the minutes as typed, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Any other issues that folks would like to present? I will probably ask each of you who's set to expire or set for a re-up to have a conversation. Let me know what your intentions are. I'd love to know that
May I
before our
ask,
next meeting.
When, hypothetically, if somebody wanted to re-up, do they have to re-up for the full 3 years? Is that what we would be saying, or would we?
No, for you and Board Member Strickland and Younger, you would say, I'm willing to stay on until my replacement is found, trained, qualified, took the oath, and assumed the position. I think we had 1 or 2 previous members who agreed to stay on, but they said, I'm only staying on for the next meeting, or
Yeah.
1 or 2 additional meetings, and then I'm resigning. So there's your warning, right? Like, so you can say, I'll stay on for the May meeting and the June meeting, but then I'm going to resign. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like
So our
once a month.
max, our max, the limit is when we have the replacement.
Correct. You could either say, I'm willing to stay on until the replacement's found, or I'm willing to stay on for X number of meetings, and then.
And we've had both.
And
happen.
then my recommendation potentially is a conversation, obviously, among the chair and vice chair, Tobias as well, about any sort of proposals around our membership makeup and our selection process, and whether council has an appetite for that or not. I mean, right now, council approves ultimately the selection by the mayor, but that's pretty much the extent of it in terms of.
I mean, given the vacancy issue, you may want to revisit this with the council and mayor's office about taking out the 2 consecutive term provision if they're willing to do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
So just curious, so say all 3 wants to stay until the replacement, and you have new candidates, how do you determine that candidate and whose place they take?
yeah, so that's kind of an inexact science, because in theory, I think you're supposed to fill the terms that are going to expire sooner. And so there's 3 vacancies right now that are set to expire in 28, where these would expire in 29, right? So whoever gets appointed. So yeah, but I don't think there's a rule. You can fill, any of the vacancies can be filled.
I think
but-
we'd also have a goal of trying to ensure staggering, just like with the inaugural board.
Right.
We
Well,
did not
the
want
thing is, right,
everybody-
you have these 3, my suggestion would be you fill the ones where people are staying on until the replacements are found so that they can get off. You know, they can be reappointed 3 years from now if they want to come back, but yeah, you want to release them as soon as you can in practice.
But you also don't want to have 6 vacancies if we decide not to.
Right.
But yeah, no, I agree. I think perhaps we look at that provision.
Anything else from any other members?
When's our next, do we have a next, like, community meeting or anything like that scheduled at any point?
I would have to check Do either of you know? I know Stephanie would know offhand, but I do not know. It's okay. I don't know, but I'll ask Stephanie to send around when she's back in office. What, I know that she was looking for, kind of trying to have a year outlook for us. And so when she gets back, we'll see if she can send that around.
Cool.
All right? Well, if no one has anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. May I have a second, please? All in favor? Motion adjourned.